Not able to do? Anybody not able to do the yesterday's requirement? Okay, you need to develop the application where user can register. At the time of registration, we need to capture role of the user. Role can be student or role can be faculty. Whenever we log in into the application, first application will check the email ID password correct or not. If email ID and password is incorrect, it will display the error message on the same page. If email ID password is correct, then it should check what is the role of the user. If the role is a student, it should go to student dashboard. If the role is faculty, it should go to faculty dashboard. In the student dashboard or faculty dashboard, we are just displaying welcome to dashboard. That's it. Welcome to student dashboard or welcome to faculty dashboard. Did you guys complete that? Yes or no? Yes, fine. Now today we are going to talk about one more concept in the servlet, that is servlet config and servlet context. The concept is servlet config and servlet context. Now here guys, servlet config and servlet context, these are predefined interfaces in the Java X.servlet package. How we have request dispatcher interface, similarly we are having servlet config and servlet context. These are predefined interfaces in Java X.servlet package. These are predefined interfaces available in Java X.servlet package. Sir, what is the purpose of this servlet config object and servlet context object? Simple. Servlet config is specific to one servlet. Specific to one servlet. That means every servlet will have its own servlet config object. Every servlet will contain its own servlet config object. Whenever servlet object is created, then servlet config object also will be created. So servlet config and servlet context are predefined interfaces in Java X.servlet package. Config is specific to one servlet. Every servlet will contain its own servlet config object. Servlet context is specific to one application. Servlet context is specific to one application. One application will contain one servlet context object. One application will contain only one context object. One application will contain one servlet context object. Now, if you want to supply any input, I want to give some input for one servlet. So in my application, there are several servlets available. For example, I have a login servlet and I have register servlet. I have student servlet and I have faculty servlet. Like this, there are multiple servlets are available in our project. So for every servlet, one servlet config object will be available, and for all the servlets, one servlet context object will be available. If you want to pass some data for one servlet, then you can go for config object. Suppose, for example, my servlet wants database details. I don't want to hard code database details in the Java program. Only this servlet want to use those properties. Only this servlet want to use those properties. If you want to send any input for particular servlet, then you can do that by using servlet config object. For example, for all my servlets, I want to pass some information from the XML. Then if you want to send the data for single servlet, then you can go for servlet config object. If you want to send the data for all the servlets, then you can go for servlet context object. So here servlet config and servlet context objects are available. These are predefined interfaces available in Java X.servlet package. It is specific to one servlet and it is specific to one application. Now, if you want to send the data for one servlet, that servlet will have its own config object. For every servlet, request object will be available, response object will be available. Similar to the request and response, every servlet will contain config object. By using that config object, we can pass some parameters for the servlet. We can pass some parameters for the servlet. I want to give database data as an input for my servlet. I don't want to hard code in the Java program. I want to read the data from outside of the Java program. Then you can use that servlet config object parameters of the servlet. Suppose the data I want to send for all the servlets. If you want to share any data to all the servlets in the application, then you can go for context object. Context is specific to one application. Config is specific to one servlet. Right. Now let us develop one program to understand how we can supply init parameters for one servlet. How can we supply init parameters for all the servlets? Right. But nowadays we are going for Spring Boot to develop, right? These concepts does not have that much demand. If you develop your application purely by using only servlet, so to supply the data for the servlet, we can go for servlet config that is specific to one servlet. If you want to send the data for all the servlets, then we need to go for servlet context object. Yeah, I will show you one simple example on the context object and config object. Now, new dynamic web project. So project name I am giving as config context app. Config context app I am trying to create. Click on next, next. Web.xml file is required. Click on finish. Right. I want the jar files to be available in the build path. I'm going for servlet-api.jar. Only one jar file I'm taking. I'm keeping that jar file in my project lib folder. I need the servlet jar file to develop this project. All right. Refreshes. Lib folder contains a jar file. Now I'm going to create one simple servlet class, new class, first servlet. I will keep that inside a package, servlet package. Yeah, first servlet. So to represent this class as a servlet, I'm extending the properties from HTTP servlet. Inside this, I'm writing do get method. I'm overriding do get method in this servlet. Perfect. I'm having do get method. Now here system.out.println, sorry, response.getWriter. Response.getWriter. I'm going to get my print writer object. Writer.append. Writer.append first servlet. Simple example. I'm creating first servlet. That's it. Similarly, I will create one more servlet which is called second servlet. Creating one more servlet that is called second servlet. Same concept I want to do for this also. The only thing is that is a different servlet class. I will give it as this is my second servlet. Second servlet. First servlet and second servlet. Now I want to map these servlets to URL patterns. How many ways are there to map? Two ways. One is by using XML. Second one is by using annotation. Let me go for XML configuration now. Web app, web.inf, web.xml. So do you know how to map the servlets to the URL pattern? Yeah. Can you tell me the tag for that? Come on. What is the tags we need to use to map our servlet to the URL pattern? Servlet tag we need to write and servlet mapping tag we need to write. Servlet tag we need to write, and madam, you can write later. Listen to that. We are writing servlet tag and we are writing servlet mapping tag. Now, inside the servlet, I need to write which tags? Inside the servlet, what we need to write? Servlet name and servlet class. So like this here, I'm writing servlet name and servlet class. You can give the name as anything. I'm giving the name as first servlet. Here we need to give class name, complete path, in dot Ashok IT dot servlet dot, this is my first servlet. Now for this servlet, this is one servlet. This servlet I want to map to URL pattern. To map this servlet to the URL pattern, we are using servlet mapping. Servlet name, what is the name of the servlet? It is first servlet. And what is the URL pattern we want to map? I'm giving URL pattern /first. Okay, can I say this? I'm mapping my servlet to a URL pattern. Yes, I'm mapping my servlet to the URL pattern. This is my first servlet. All right. Now, similarly, I want to map the second servlet also. Can we do the same thing? Yes. So, servlet name, servlet mapping. Here I'm writing servlet name. Servlet name I am giving as second servlet, and the class name is second servlet. Class name is second servlet. This servlet name I'm giving as second servlet. The URL pattern is /second. So with this, I'm able to create two servlets in my project. Those two servlets I map it to URL pattern. Let me run my project. Run on server. Tomcat, next, finish. Yeah, I'm running my application. Let me access first. Am I able to access my first servlet? Yes or no? Yes, I'm able to access my first servlet. Similarly, copy this URL and go to here. Let me use it as second. I'm able to access my first servlet and I'm able to access my second servlet also. That is fine. Now, I want to pass some input for my servlets. I want to pass some inputs for my servlets. Now, if you want to pass input for a single servlet, suppose here I'm having one servlet, first servlet is available. Here I'm having one servlet, second servlet is available. So this is my first servlet and this is my second servlet. If I want to pass input for all the servlets, any input which is common for all the servlets, that input we are going to store into which object, guys? Context object. Why for context object? Why for context object? Why we need to go for context object? All the servlets can access the data from the context objects. Now, what about config object? What about the config object? Config object is applicable for all the servlets or only one servlet. Here, first servlet will have one config object. Second servlet will have one config object. First servlet will have its own config object. Second servlet will have its own config object. If you want to send any data for single servlet, then we need to go for config. Okay, guys. So this is config object. To supply the data for first servlet, we will go for config. It is specific to first servlet. This is specific to second servlet. If I want to send the data, any data which is common for all the servlets in my application, then I can go for context object. Throughout the application, one context object will be available. For every servlet, one config object will be available. Both are interfaces only. Now, how to send the data? By using servlet config object. I want to send the data for first servlet by using config object. Now, to send the data for the servlet using config object, there is a tag called init param. What is the tag name, guys? Init param. And we are having param name and param value. Param name is available and param value is available. Param name available and param value is available. Now here I'm giving the message and here I'm giving it as welcome to first servlet. Welcome to first servlet. Now I'm writing a message tag here. So init param name is key, param value is welcome to first servlet. Now which servlet can access these parameters now? Both servlets can access these parameters or only first servlet can access these parameters? Only first servlet can access these parameters. Why only first servlet can access? These init params are specific to a particular servlet. Init parameters are used to send the data to servlet config object. Every servlet will have its own config object. Only that particular servlet can access the data from the config object. Now go to first servlet. Now I want to get the context object by using first servlet. Okay, directly there is a method get servlet config. It is a predefined method, guys. It is available in the HTTP servlet. Can I call superclass method in the subclass directly? Can I call superclass method in the subclass directly? Yes, we can access that superclass method in the subclass directly. I'm giving a method called get servlet config. I'm getting the config object. Now here, from this config object, I want to access the message config dot get up init parameter. What is that init parameter? Key is available. Key is message. Key is message. I'm getting that message. That message I'm adding to my print writer to send as a response to the user. Am I hard coding the message? I'm taking the message from the init parameter. Init parameter. How to store the data in the init parameter? Init param. Like this, you can configure multiple init parameters. Parameter name and parameter value. This is key and this is value. Now, I want to get that data from the init parameter. To get the data from the init parameter, first I need to get the config object. From the config object, I'm getting the init parameter. Then I'm writing that init parameter value. Similarly, can I write a init parameter for second servlet also? Can I write a init parameter for second servlet also? Yes, I'm writing init parameter for second servlet also. 1 minute. Yeah, it should be available inside the servlet tag. So init parameter for second servlet. Here I'm writing a message, welcome to second servlet. Welcome to second servlet. The key is a message only. The value welcome to second servlet. Here the value is welcome to first servlet. In the second servlet also, I want to get the config object. How to get the config object? How to get the config object? Directly we are going to use get a servlet config. So it is giving me config object. From this config object, I want to get the init parameter. How to get the init parameter? Config dot get init parameter. What is the key? What is the key? Message is the key. Now let me access that message. That message I'm passing to append method. Now, am I hard coding the message? I'm reading the message from init parameters. I'm reading the message from init parameters. Now refresh our project. Observe carefully. I created one class called first servlet. First servlet is extending the properties from HTTP servlet. That first servlet I map it to URL pattern by using web.xml. First servlet, servlet name, servlet class. Inside the first servlet I'm writing init parameter. This init parameter can be accessed by only first servlet. This init parameter can be accessed by only first servlet. And here I'm writing second servlet. Second servlet also having its own init parameter. This init parameter can be accessed by second servlet. How to get the config object? Config objects are used to pass init parameters to the servlet. If you want to send any data to your servlet object, then you can go for init parameters. To read that init parameters, config object we are going to use. If I want to send some data for all the servlets, then we will go for context object. First, let us see, are we able to read these init parameters or not? Refresh, run as, run on server. Right click, next, finish. Yep, fine. So here, /first, send the request. Am I able to get to welcome to first servlet? Actually, where this message is available? This message available in the Java program or this message available in the web.xml? Web.xml. How this message is going to my servlet? Config object. Servlet config objects are used to pass init parameters to the servlet. They are used to pass init parameters to the servlet. Now, second servlet. Do I have any hard-coded message in the second servlet? Do I have any hard-coded message in the second servlet? No, not available. Go to the second servlet, enter. Am I able to get welcome to second servlet? Yes, I'm able to get welcome to second servlet. Keys are same. Keys are same. But here, this init parameter belongs to first servlet. This init parameter belongs to second servlet. For example, if I give message 1 here and if I give message 2 here. Okay, message 1 and message 2. Then first servlet should read the data by using message 1 and second servlet should read the data by using message 2. Whatever the key you configure for the parameter name, with that key only we can access the parameter value. Are you guys able to follow me? Now, for example, in the first servlet, if I give message 2, I'm trying to access message 2. Message 2 is a init parameter key belongs to first servlet or second servlet? Second servlet. Can I access one servlet init parameter in the another servlet? No. Let's try this. Let's go for first. Am I getting any response? Null value. Why null value? Why null value? First servlet is trying to access a message 2. Message 2 is belongs to first servlet or message 2 belongs to second servlet? Message 2 belongs to second servlet. Now tell me, what is a servlet config? Why we need servlet config? What is the purpose of servlet config and why we need servlet config? So servlet config and servlet context are predefined interfaces available in the servlet package. Servlet config is specific to one servlet. Servlet context is specific to one application. Every servlet will contain its own servlet config object. One application will contain one servlet context object. By using servlet config, we can pass init parameters to servlet. Okay, guys. So one servlet can access another servlet init parameters? No. Every servlet will have its own init parameter. First servlet init parameters cannot access it by second servlet. Second servlet init parameters cannot access it by first servlet. If you want to send any init parameters to your servlet, then you can go for config object. If you want to send any parameters for all the servlets, then you can go for context object, context parameters. By using context object, we can pass parameters to all the servlets. By using servlet context object, we can pass context parameters to all servlets available in the application. All servlets available in the application. All right. So first we understood how to configure init parameters. Now we need to configure context parameters also. We will configure the context parameters. Let's make a note of that. Servlet config and servlet context. Interview question: what are the differences between config object and context object? That is the interview question. What is the difference between config object and context object? Config object and context object. Note it down. Servlet config and servlet context. Servlet config and servlet context object. Predefined interfaces available in Java X.servlet package. These are predefined interfaces available in Java X.servlet package. Predefined interfaces available in Java X.servlet package. Predefined interfaces available in Java X.Servlet package. Yeah, just note it down. Completed? Yeah. So take this. First servlet, second servlet. every servlet will have its own config object, and for that config object we can pass init parameters. For all the servlets in the application, one context object will be available. For the context object we can pass the context parameters. If you don't want to hard code anything in the Java program, then we can configure them as init parameters and context parameters. But currently we are not using these XML files at all. Do you think that we are going to use XML files for the configuration of servlets? No. Then what is the use of init parameters and context parameters? Interview purpose, that's it. Nobody will use this. Completed, guys? Yeah. Yeah, you can take configuring init parameters. Configuring init parameters. Just this is syntax you need to note down. So how to configure init parameters? Configuring init parameters. Here you can write it as package name dot class name. These are the init parameters for one servlet I am giving. Init parameters for the servlet. @ web init param annotation is there. Init param like this. Inside the servlet tag, we need to write the init param. Inside the servlet tag, we need to write this init parameter. Inside the servlet tag, we need to configure init params. Yeah. Next one, reading the init parameters. Just write this program. Reading init parameters by using config object. Reading init parameters using config object. Reading init parameter by using config object. So this is the servlet program which will tell you how to read the init parameters by using config object. servlet config object, which is used to read the init parameters. No, not from database. Database properties, username, URL, password, param name, param value. Here, here I have given param name as a message one, right? Here you can give as a username. You can give the database username, whatever you have it. Okay. That is what database source values. Instead of configuring in the Java program, we can configure like this: username, password, URL, driver, like this. Right. But nobody will follow this approach. Are you guys clear? Next one, we need to understand how to configure context parameters. How to configure context parameters. What is the meaning of context parameters? If you want to pass any data from the web.xml to all the servlets, then you can go for context. If you want to pass the data to particular servlet, then go for config. Now, so here init parameters are specific to particular servlet. That is the reason I am writing inside the servlet tag. Okay. So these init parameters are specific to first servlet. That's why I'm writing inside the servlet tag. Here, second servlet is available. These init parameters are belongs to second servlet. That's why I'm writing inside the servlet. Context parameters are specific to particular servlet. Are they common for all the servlets? Common for all the servlets. So I should write inside the servlet or I should write outside the servlet? We need to write outside the servlet. Okay, let us see here how we are going to write the context params. Now, context param is the tag. Inside this tag, we can write the param name and we can write the param value. Param name and param value. You can give anything. Suppose I want to pass our website information. Key can be anything, value can be anything. Now, so in our project, there are so many servlets available. For all the servlets, I want to pass this data, our website URL. It is a common for all the servlets. So that's why I'm writing this as a context param. Now, how to get the context param object? I got the config object. Now I want to get the context object. By using the context object, I can access the URL. Now, see here, request dot get servlet context. What is the method available? Get servlet context. From the request object, we can directly access our context object. Then context dot get context param, context dot get context dot get parameter, context dot get init parameter. So what that is, what is the key that I have given, guys? Website I have given as a key. Now here I am getting website. So for this message I want to append some value. For this message I want to append this value. Are you clear, guys? Now same thing I am going to do inside the second servlet also. I got the message too, and I am getting my website. For this message I am passing some website. Okay, so let us see, are we able to read the context parameters in the both servlets or not? Right, let me run my application. Right click, run as, run on server, next and finish. Yep, started. Go to first one. First one, am I able to get this? Yes. Go to second one. Am I able to get this? Yes. That means what is the understanding, guys? What is the understanding now? Context parameters are shared with all the servlets. Config parameters are shared with only one servlet. Now you see in the web.xml file, I have configured context param. I have configured context param. How to read these context parameters in my servlet? To read the context parameters, first we need to get the context object. Context dot get init parameter of the key, then I got the value. Website is a context parameter. I'm able to get that website value in the first servlet as well as in the second servlet. So that means this diagram is correct or not? What are the context parameters are available? Context parameters are stored in the context object. That context object we can access in all the servlets. Config objects are specific to particular servlet. Now syntax to configure context parameters. Syntax to configure context parameters. You can configure multiple context parameters. I have configured one context parameter here. You can write this tag with multiple key and values. Syntax to configure context parameters in the web.xml. 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 Note, context parameters should be available outside of the servlet tag. Note, context parameters should be available outside of servlet tag. Context parameters should be available outside of servlet tag. Context parameters should be available outside of servlet tag. Context parameters should be available outside of servlet tag. To read context parameters, to read context parameters, to read context parameters, we need to get servlet context object. To read context parameters, we need to get a servlet context object. To read context parameters, we need to get servlet context object. Yep. take this code. How I am getting servlet context object? Yes, you can take this servlet. Here I'm getting config object. Here I'm getting context object. Getting a config object. Getting a config object. Here I can say getting context object. Getting config object and getting context object. Getting the config object and getting the context object. Getting the config object and getting context object. Completed, guys? Yeah, just read it once. Servlet config and servlet context. Come on, read it, guys. Understand what is the context, what is the config, what is the purpose of config and context. What is the purpose of config and context? Okay. Now, guys, I have couple of questions on the servlets now. First one, how many objects will be created for a servlet? We are creating a servlet. We are sending a request to the servlet. Can we send multiple requests to the servlets? Yes or no? Multiple users are accessing Gmail application. Multiple students are accessing our institute website. So one servlet is available. Multiple users are trying to access the servlet. Now my first question is, how many objects will be created for a servlet? How many objects will be created for a servlet when we send multiple requests? Okay, guys, that is the first question. I'm noting down the questions. So this weekend I want you to research on these questions and I want you people to come up with the answers. How many objects will be created for a servlet when we send multiple requests? And next one, how many ways are there to create our servlet program? All right, how many ways are there to create our servlet program? Suppose servlet is used to handle request and response. We are creating by using HTTP servlet. How many ways are there to create a servlet, and why HTTP servlet is better than the remaining two approaches? Okay, how many ways are there? How many ways are there to create our own servlet? To create our own servlet. Okay, and third question, what is servlet life cycle? Very famous interview question. What is servlet life cycle and how servlets are going to execute internally? What is the servlet life cycle? And here I have another question. What is the difference between request dispatcher and send redirect method? Okay, if you want to, what is the purpose of request dispatcher? What is the purpose of request dispatcher? To redirect the request from one resource to another resource. Similarly, we are having one more method called send redirect method that is also used to redirect the request from one resource to another resource. So why there are two options available? What is the difference between them? What is the difference between request dispatcher and send redirect method? And fifth one is, what are scoped variables? What are scoped variables in servlets? What are scoped variables available in the servlet? Okay, what is the difference between request and session? All these concepts I have not explained in the class. I'm telling you, I did not explain these concepts in the class. Before I am going to explain, I want you people to do some analysis in the internet. I want to improve your self-learning skill, right? So what is the difference between request and session in web application? What is the difference between request and session in web application? So these are the 6 questions that I have. Are you guys clear? Yes. Can you do research on these 6 questions? Yes, note down. You need to come up with your answers, guys. Before I'm going to explain, I want to hear from you people. If we cover these 6 questions, then we are done with our servlets. We can go for JSP. I'm not going to waste much time for the JSP, guys, because it is not used in the industry. So just 3-4 days only we are going to spend for JSP. Angular or React? Just note down these 6 questions. If you get answers for these 6 questions, we are done with the servlets. If you don't get the answers, I will explain. Once these are completed, then we will go for JSP. Monday, we will start the JSP if you get the answers for these questions. Otherwise, Monday, I will explain these questions. And let me add one more question also, guys. A minute. Servlet versus generic servlet versus HTTP servlet. For second question, the answer is the third question. Second question answer is the third question only. Servlet interface, generic servlet class, and HTTP servlet class. And one more question I'm adding. What is request parameter? What is request parameter? I want you people to write down answers in your notebook and you need to show me in the Monday class. Notebook, you have to write it. So don't say that, sir, I have researched in the internet. I know that. I want to see on the paper. You have to write it on the notebook. Search that question in the Google, you will get the answer. Write down on the notebook and read that. Why that answer? You can use ChatGPT also. From now? Okay. Elon Musk is there now? Bud. BRD, Bud. How many objects will be created for a servlet class? I'm not asking about the request objects or response objects. I have a servlet, first servlet. How many times objects will be created for first servlet class, not request and response objects? You got my point, na? So now here I have created one servlet with a name called first servlet, right? I have created a servlet with a name called first servlet. I'm sending the request to the first servlet 10 times. Okay, same request I will send once again. Same request I will send once again. If I send 10 requests to this servlet class, how many objects will be created for this class? I'm not talking about these parameters. Are you clear, guys? How many objects will be created for our servlet class when we send multiple requests for the same servlet? That is the question. So I want you people to research these 8 questions in the internet and note down the answers also before coming to Monday session. Next week, we are going to work on JSP. As I told you, JSP outdated in the market. So we will see some basic part, what is JSP and how to develop 1 or 2 applications by using JSP. Then we will work on servlet plus JSP, one project we will develop by using MVC architecture. I will tell you what is MVC architecture. Using JDBC, servlet and JSP, we will develop one CRUD operation based application. Once that part is completed, then we are going to start with our frameworks concepts, right? So we are stopping our advanced Java by next week. So in the next week, our JSP and MVC will be completed. Yeah, we will complete the project, right? That is just a CRUD operation, login, registration, all the functionalities will develop in the single project. It's not a simple project, just a CRUD operations. That is what Hibernate will start. Shaker sir will start. All right, guys, good. Thank you. When Angular will start? People are asking. Angular I will teach in the end of the JRTP. At the end of the JRTP, I will teach the Angular, not now. All right, fine, guys. So we'll be taking on Monday. Before coming to Monday session, please research on these questions. Thank you, guys. This is the assignment for you in this week.